Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Poema podcast. I am James Prescott, your host. Welcome back to the show. Really great to have you all back again. And today we have a returning guest, someone I've become friends with recently in the last kind of few months, who came on a few months ago. Virginia Spots, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be back here. Great to see you again. And yeah, this should be a fun conversation.
Yes. The last time we talked about your experiences with grief and uh, being a death doula and training as one, uh,
hmm
and all of that. Today we're going to talk about something different, another aspect of who you are and what you do, because you are an actress and
hmm
you've been on several podcasts, I think, haven't you? Several episodic
Yes.
podcasts. One in particular that I've discovered called the Sheridan Tapes, which
hmm
is just finished its fifth season. Is that correct? Fifth season?
Fourth,
Fourth. Sorry,
fourth season.
fourth. If I knew it was fourth,
No,
definitely.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's the final season, isn't it? It's just coming to a
Yes.
close. Yeah. That's
Yeah, we just wrapped up the show. It's with episode 100. So
wow. That's a good episode to finish on. Uh,
it is, yeah, very satisfying.
Absolutely, must be. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And then there's a few other things you've been in as well, aren't there?
Yeah, recently I was on an episode of Feminist Fairy Tales. It's an anthology, and they do yeah, different stories presented from different writers. I was in a two-parter called The Bell Witch, which is a story out of the Appalachian region of the U.S. And I played the titular Bell Witch, who was given the name Kate in the script, and it was sort of a twist on like, what if she, wasn't like sort of an evil, spooky, haunting spirit, and was more of like a companion to this girl who was growing up near the woods and felt very lonely and isolated from her community and really needed a friend. And the haunting was on purpose to try and get her freedom from her family. So that was really, really fun. I think it's probably my best work. It was like I got to do narration and playing in the world of the story and being a spooky ghost. So it's like
Pretty
all of my
awesome.
favorite things. Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, you've done a lot of things. I mean, what was it like? How did your journey into acting begin?
Uh, the first time I remember acting um, was I was in fifth grade and we had a dare skit to do in class, like the drugs education thing that they did with kids in I don't know, maybe they still do it, mostly the 90s and 2000s, I think. I learned more about drugs through dare than I would have through my peers, quite honestly. But I remember we had to write a skit, and there was the whole idea was like there would be these cheerleaders, and like some druggie would come in and try to be like, "Hey, do you want to do the thing?" And they'll be like, "No," and do a cheer. I play the druggie, and my line, which I came up with, is I was like, in my fifth grade imagination, I was like, "Well, what if I come in like a little bit drunk, and so I'm just sort of like woozy and slurry or whatever, and I say like, hey, do you want to smoke some beer or drink some cigarettes? Because I'm out of my mind and I don't know what I'm saying." And then the cheerleaders say no, and I do a pratfall to the floor. So that was my first role. And I know that's so silly, but I like bringing that up because it makes me laugh. I think it shows just how much I was trying to like immerse myself in the story from that age.
Yeah.
And then in high school, I got into more theater as well, which really saved my mental health. Honestly, studied
Interesting.
acting in college for a bit, and then sort of did some every now and then little, you know, minuscule indie things. If it went in indie film and in some theater things until 2019, I started getting more serious about it, and I met my former creative partner, and then we started doing audio dramas together. And I love the flexibility of voice acting and producing audio stories. So that's been what I've been doing since then. And now I am trying to figure out what's next because the Sheridan tapes has just wrapped up, and that was the past 4 years of my life. So,
Yeah, wow. I mean,
yeah.
that's an amazing story. I'm really curious as well, like when you mentioned how it helped your mental health.
Hmm.
And in what sense, I mean, in what ways did it do that?
I feel like what I was struggling with through the end of middle school and coming into high school was this sense of like, I didn't know that I had ADHD. I didn't know any of my family history as much as I thought I did of mental health and the things that were like kicking in for myself as I was like going through puberty and maturing and everything. And I just felt so like lost and unmotivated as to what I was supposed to be doing. Like things in my brain were starting to not make sense like they used to. Like I was used to being a straight A student. And then all of a sudden I just like couldn't get myself to care. Um, and it felt like that's a very like stuck feeling. So what I loved about going to like any acting classes or going to after school theater is it asks you to make new choices. It asks you to sort of shake yourself out of that, be this different thing for a while, and then you're often running around, or you're also singing, or you're also dancing. Because I did a lot of musicals in high school, so I feel like in a somatic like body sense, it was exactly what I needed to sort of just try some new patterns, try some different things, get the energy out. Let myself be a little bit crazy on stage. Maybe have a role where I'm playing like a person who's screaming and out of her mind, or I play someone who is just like, yeah, very physical with what they have to do. So it really helped me like push a lot of that energy out and learn how to make new choices and like get out of that stuck feeling. So yeah, I think in that sense it really helped.
Mm. Yeah, because it can be sort of an escape, can't it? I guess. I mean, any kind of creative outlet can be an escape in a sense, but when you're
Yeah.
acting, you're kind of literally immersing yourself in the character and then in another person's story,
Hmm.
which kind of allows you to escape your own, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think some escapes can be really healthy, and especially if you're prone to just sort of like rumination,
Yeah.
like I sometimes have been, where I'm like, you know what? No, it's better for me to just put this down, do something different for a while, and I'm going to feel a lot better about this when I come back to it.
Mm.
Yeah. So that, and then also, I mean, I was becoming very serious in my youth group at the same time as I was growing up in that. So I felt like I was growing two completely different parts of myself, where like I was one person in theater and I was a different person in youth group. And sometimes there was some overlap, but really it was like I was finding more joyous, authentic, like relaxed expression in the theater side of myself than I was in the youth group side of myself. I think they exercised different and genuine parts of me, but
Uh,
yeah, but it was interesting though. Like theater really was the excuse to be able to escape from any expectations whatsoever and just have fun. So, and now of course I have integrated all of those parts of myself, and I am both serious and silly uh, in the same person, which is good.
yeah, no, it's good. It's good when you start reclaiming those different parts of yourself and kind of integrating them into one. I've
Yeah.
I've been doing that a bit myself in the last few years as well.
Mm,
It's always interesting when you
yeah.
look back and see the different people that you were in different places, and yeah,
Yeah.
maybe the
How
miles.
have you found your way into that integration?
I think therapy,
Yeah, for sure.
embodiment work,
Hmm.
and a bit of spiritual direction and healthy community where I
Yeah.
was safe to be me.
Yeah,
Um,
I love that.
I think what I realize now is that I really wore a mask for a long time uh,
Hmm.
after my mum died. Like I'm talking almost nearly was 16, 17 years almost like,
Hmm.
and I didn't realize it. And I thought the mask was me. and it turns out it wasn't.
Yeah.
It had elements of me, like it had elements of the real me,
Right.
obviously, but but
Yeah.
but it wasn't the complete me. It wasn't. There were parts of me that left behind or hidden away or buried. And my grief, even I'd done that, and I put on this mask, and then eventually the mask came off because all the things that I used to hold the mask on, like my house security, job security,
Hmm.
house security, and religion,
Yeah.
toxic religion, and the desire to be famous. For some reason,
Yeah.
a famous author, like which is going to somehow fill this hole, which I didn't realize at the time, of course. Uh, when they all fell apart, the mask fell off, and I was faced with myself. And since then, I've been finding myself and reclaiming myself again. Um,
Yeah.
like the whole
Nice.
Superman thing. I've always loved Superman, but I kind of buried that a little bit for a long time because I was childish, it's immature,
Right.
I'm not allowed to have that. Oh, it's not a, it's an alternative god,
Mm.
all that kind of stuff.
Making an idol of Superman. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, all that kind of stuff. So I stopped. I little, I re-embraced that as an adult in an adult way, in an
Yeah.
appropriate way, but not in a kind of. I'm not burying it anymore. I'm just owning it. And I'm not
Hmm.
ashamed to own those parts of myself anymore. Um, you know, and that's the difference.
Yeah. I love that. I've been trying to do that too. Like, I realized recently that sleeping with a stuffed animal in my bed, like against my back, is super comforting. So I've been embracing those little parts where I'm like, you know what? It's actually okay if I want to sleep with a stuffed animal and like have something to hold on to, and that makes my body feel better. Like,
Yeah,
no shame. I'm 34 and I love that.
yeah,
Love that for me.
I
Yeah.
yeah, I found a way to hold. I found a way to a unique position of my pillow, on my head on my pillow, that I like to sleep. That makes me able to
Yeah.
sleep better. And it's not like the usual shape of the pillow. It's like I almost kind of lay on it, like hold it, like I almost kind of hold it,
Oh, yeah.
or squeeze it, or
Yeah.
tighten it, or squeeze it up a bit, fold it in half, and
Hmm.
put my head on it, or something like that. I don't know, but but it, yeah, but it means I can sleep better. So
There you
yeah,
go.
I'm just gonna do it. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe lying absolutely flat on a pillow just doesn't work for me.
Mm-mm.
Um, yeah, yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? That's part of growth. Um, but that's the thing about it. I mean, has acting helped you discover parts of yourself that you didn't realize that you had?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And I mean, like I was saying about growing up, developing the theater side of myself and then separately the youth group side of myself.
Mm,
There was for sure a bunch of sides of myself that weren't safe to show up in the youth group space, and like sometimes weren't appropriate for sure, but mostly stuff that I knew I like had to hide. So being in high school theater and then in college theater, getting to play like little bits of a character like Medea, like the Greek Medea, who is just this like full of rage, full of revenge. And then in college, like doing some scene work with characters who are more in touch with their sexuality, which, oh my God, at the time, that was incredibly rough for me. I could feel how rough it was for me. And I was like, I know I'm a good actor. Why is this hard for me? This is so frustrating. And I think I started to realize then how much my upbringing had like disconnected me from some vital parts of myself. And I didn't really fully integrate that until like the past few years. And once I started actually, like, realistically, honestly engaging with my, like, rage and power and sexuality, I began to be able to play different characters a lot more authentically. And I think that comes through in, like, I was saying, I just did a character called the Bell Witch, and like there's like there was actually a lot of softness in that character, but the principles of like darkness and power still apply there. And I did another voice acting thing for a limited podcast series called Of the Sword last year, which released in September to raise money for um, trans healthcare, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And one of these scripts was actually written by my girlfriend. It was called Salome, and it was this monologue about a woman who was a stage actress, and this new guy came in from out of town to sort of lead the theater group, and he was very charming and charismatic, and he said he wanted to put on a production of Salome, and he hired this actress to play Salome. And the story of that is like she was the person to like dance with the beheaded John the Baptist head. So there's a lot of themes of like darkness, death, sexuality, taboo in that. And expressing that character, she's like admitting to murdering this guy because of the way he mistreated her during this time. And playing that was so satisfying because I could have never done that authentically in my early 20s, being so disconnected from who I am, but I can now. And it was for my girlfriend's script. So I feel like there were so many layers of like, I can pull in the seduction and the like, I don't know, like a snake slithering towards you sort of feeling where like she has murdered somebody. Like, but in a way that's so sexy. I could have never done that in my early 20s. Um, and I think also just accessing true, like strong brokenheartedness. And I think I want to put it that way because, like, I don't know, I feel like in high school and college theater situations, you tend to like run into situations where like you are handed scenes where it's like, okay, you're going to display like a big emotion here. And so people go really big into crying or screaming or something like that, or like, oh my God, we like this couple is like, we lost our baby and we're so sad and it's so big. But I think like it can be hard when you're younger to find those like really delicate touches on that sort of thing and to bring it into a more naturalistic space. So I think like it was interesting being in my early 20s and being able to feel where I wasn't quite connecting authentically enough with the material. And I was like, okay, I can tell these are parts of me, but I need to walk through some life and some personal processing, and then I'll be able to come back to this. So, um, so yeah, it even showed me like parts of myself that I wasn't ready to discover yet, uh, which I think is interesting. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that is really interesting. I mean, I've done a lot of parts work in therapy, on internal family systems therapy, where you literally have parts that are
Mm-hmm.
almost characters in their own right, and you can turn them into characters as well. And uh, yeah, and they all have different, and they all want to protect you, but they all have different roles.
Mm-hmm.
So they're all a part of you in
Yeah.
some way because some of them are trauma responses. So
Yeah.
it's like, and if they blend with your core self, then you start acting like those parts
Yeah.
and not like yourself. So
Yeah.
it's just I just think it's fascinating that like the I wonder if there's an element of that sometimes when people are acting that those part that because we all have these parts that
Right.
whether elements of those of some different parts come into play in terms of their interpretations of characters.
Yeah, I think so. And I think there's healthy ways to use that or to be able to use that consciously without letting the acting become your therapy. Like, I think that could be a
Mm.
problem with how people approach method acting, where I don't know, sometimes it feels like people want to say, oh, I'm a method actor because they want an excuse to like be an asshole. And they don't want to like separate themselves from the work enough to have like a technical grasp of it. They just sort of want to go into it and shut their brain off and be in it. That might be a harsh criticism of method acting, but at the same time, I'm like, nah, I'm kind of a professional actor. I think I can say this. Yeah, I don't know. but like I know I've certainly used bits of my own experience, especially writing a lot of the scripts that I myself have been in. I've put things in there for me to be able to express and give that part a place to live in the world in a
Mm.
story. So that's been really cool. And I try to only do it in ways that are like vague enough and sort of like animalistic enough that it's not me specifically speaking about like, and this is what happened to me here. Because yeah, I think if you personalize it too much, then your brain starts to interpret reality as like whatever happens next means that like this is what it means for my own personal situation, and like you start to uh, give yourself a little bit of a psychosis, I think. If you don't have like if you don't know where it ends and you begin.
Yeah,
um
and that's
yeah,
we've even seen that happen with some method acting as well.
yeah.
Uh, there's a famous one of Jim Carrey, I think, where he played
Oh yeah, he played Andy Kaufman, I
Andy
think.
Kaufman, and he kind of became
Yeah.
him, you know.
Hmm.
And it was so much so that apparently when he finished the movie, he couldn't even remember who he was anymore, and he had to
Mm,
figure out who he was again. And it was kind of
right.
a kind of a, but it was kind of a healing thing for him because it kind of helped him figure out who he really was,
Yeah.
which is a really interesting thing. But it's definitely an example of what not to do when you're acting. I think, like, yeah, like to get that immersed in a
Yeah.
character that you forget who you are as a separate person from them. You know,
Right.
yeah. And I always
Yeah,
want,
I've always
yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
No, no, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I remember from when I used to do a lot of stage acting, I remember directors telling me that there was like the 5 to 10% of your brain that had to be you at all times to remember like your marks, your lines, your space in relation to the other actors, like your awareness of the technical aspects. And the rest of it could be a character, but like don't you let go of that part because that's the part you need to come back to afterwards, essentially. So yeah, I think that's how I try to approach when I'm in scenes as well. It's like there's enough room for me to really feel like I'm falling into it, but I know like I'm still there. Uh, especially when I was doing Sheridan tapes and like maybe directing a scene that I'm also in or providing direction, which grew my brain in a whole other way. Because normally, if you're acting, you're not supposed to be like, oh, I noticed like you had a little line misread. Like you're not supposed to give notes to the other actors. So I had to break a lot of the ingrained rules I had learned in theater working on this show. But needs must.
Mm, yeah, yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Um, and actually, I mean, like, I just have you ever played a character where they've kind of stuck in your head afterwards, and you wanted to get rid of them, kind of because it's not a character that you
Hmm.
particularly want want to be like, um,
That's an interesting
and it's kind of.
question.
I mean,
Um.
I asked that because really because I remember Heath Ledger playing the Joker and doing it so well,
Mm,
and like he stayed in he used he prepared by like you know living in a room on his own for weeks or whatever, perfecting this character or whatever, and then he couldn't sleep and he couldn't he had insomnia and he was all of that, and that's what led to his tragic death. And I just wondered if like sometimes you can immerse yourself in a character so much that
mm.
even if you know you're separate from that character, it still kind of sticks in your head a little bit too much. Has that ever happened to
I,
you?
you know, I didn't think of one until just the last second, right when you finished speaking there. I was in a fringe show for the Kansas City Fringe Festival, like, gosh, 13 years ago. And it was a play called Jet Propulsion that was about, oh gosh, what's his name? Oh no, what's his name? JPL, Jack Parsons. It's about Jack Parsons, who is the inventor of rocket fuel. He had a deep interest in the occult and a really interesting, crazy story. And this play had the characters of Jack Parsons, it had Aleister Crowley, it had L. Ron Hubbard, and then it had me, and I was playing several female characters. One of those was this woman named Marjorie. She was a lover of Jack Parsons, and in the play, um, she was coming in as this sort of like dark muse. And then I remember reading her biography when I was like trying to just like understand her a little more, because I had a really hard time getting into her. Like the other female characters I could figure out, but like she honestly scared me a little bit. And I think that is part of like just where I was at the time personally. I was feeling like, oh no, I've been in darkness too long. I need to go back to the church. And then all of a sudden I was playing this woman who was like haunted by hallucinations that were oftentimes very scary, and was like doing sex magic with Jack Parsons to try and bring about, pretty sure the Antichrist, or no, the Moonchild. That's what they called it, and that was part of like Odo Templi Orientus beliefs, Aleister Crowley beliefs about that stuff. And it's funny because like now I have learned a little bit more about ODO, about Aleister Crowley, and like it's still like pretty weird, but it doesn't scare me the way that it used to. And yeah, like spending time with that character really freaked me out. I didn't like it. I felt like I was inviting something into myself that I wasn't quite comfortable with. Um, and I still had a blast doing the show. But I was just relieved when it ended because I didn't know how to process her yet. I didn't know how to hold on to that.
Mm.
So yeah, I think that's really the only time. And it's like I don't regret doing that show at all, because that taught me something really valuable about what I could hold on to at that time and what I couldn't. Um, yeah, so yeah, no regrets. If anyone from if the playwright or any of the actors or audience from that day hears this, I don't think you will, but if you happen to, don't regret it at all. Just it was a unique experience for my life at the time.
That's interesting. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
That is fascinating. 'Cause obviously, and when we play, when actors play parts, they kind of have to be that character when they're performing.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, um, I know for me,
Yeah.
as someone who's very highly sensitive and very empathetic and everything, it would be really, really hard for me to do that. Um,
Yeah.
and that would mess me up completely to play any kind of tortured soul.
Hmm.
What would
Yeah, that could it can be harder for sure. Like, and I think that's why I like voice acting, because even if I approach a character who is really tough like that, like realistically, I only have to go into it for really short periods. Um,
yeah.
it's mostly skilled cold reading, is what I feel like I do now, where I have didn't have to memorize the lines, didn't have to like live in the body of this character for very long, and I'm just like jumping into it. So I feel like that has made it easier for me to engage with things like that. Um, yeah,
Interesting. I mean, like,
yeah.
in terms of like, obviously, you've had your own personal journey,
Hmm.
which is your own circumstances and things, which are independent of your acting. But was there any sense of that acting helped you process that, or helped you get through that, or was a support to you
Yeah,
on that?
for sure. And I think especially with two characters in particular, one is she's just a character that I played in a murder mystery, maybe 5 months after I experienced pregnancy loss, like really late stillbirth situation. And I was doing a local murder mystery dinner theater, and I was playing the woman that everybody killed. She was very hated. She was a bitch. She was so funny. So she was really funny to to play, because just like full of her own power and confidence, quick-witted, mean to absolutely everybody, wore this tight fitting dress. It was like honestly really cathartic to play her at that time in my life. And I only had to be on for half of the show because before intermission I died. So um, I enjoyed playing her because it was like the complete opposite of how I was feeling in my day-to-day life. So it was really fun to like stretch into something and to figure out new ways to make the audience laugh with little gestures, little eye rolls, little side comments. Like I remember one night we were performing at this place that was in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it was already rural in California, Eastern California, where I lived. But we were performing at this area that, like, the town was maybe 100 people, and there was one business slash store slash restaurant slash bar. That's where we were performing. And we had these audience participation questions because we were all pretending to be like running for city council. And
Mm.
so this guy who was given a question stands up from the audience and he's trying to get through it, but he is so drunk, comically drunk. And he finally gets to the end of the question for me, for my character. And I'm like, thank you, sir. And I'm going to buy you a shot after this. And like the whole room was like, yeah. So it was like, and then actually we did end up doing a shot at the end of the night. He bought me Jaeger, which was unfortunate. But it was really funny to just get to do things like that and be on my feet and be like sassy and mean and crazy. So that really helped me sort of try on a different energy temporarily for a little bit in the months after all of these really rough personal times.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
and then playing Kate Sheridan in the Sheridan tapes, who is like the sister of this missing infamous author, um, of which the show is named after. So she starts the show as this like sort of misunderstood sister who lives in the Midwest with her family, her boy. She's an accountant and is sort of distant from Anna, her sister. And then she joins the story and starts trying to look for her. And there's a bunch of personal transformation that happens for her. And Kate's sense of where family is at the beginning, family versus her purpose. It feels like those things are like in odds with each other at the beginning of the show. And at the end of the show, she's found a way to like integrate all of that. And I think I was going through a lot of similar questioning these past few years, like realizing that my sexuality wasn't what I thought it was, that my like sense of family and the sorts of relationships I wanted to have in my life was maybe different from a monogamous marriage. I was losing my sense of faith. It was like a bunch of stuff for me, and I was able to put little bits of that into Kate's story while keeping it separate and its own thing. And now, of course, I'm at a time where now that the show has ended, there are I feel like I am still on that journey of redefining where I'm at with everything, but I'm really grateful I got to sort of try that on with Kate and just see something work out for a character like that and to feel so deeply connected to that. And yeah, I think writing and acting in the show and then producing it for most of the runtime, producing it myself, has been great. Has been really good for my self confidence. Has been really good for building up the things inside of me that I sort of put to the side because I thought I
Mm.
was supposed to be a good Christian wife and mother. Um, so yeah, it's been really just creativity in general. I think has been the most helpful uh, tool for me to like work out some of my anxieties and fears, but in a way where it's like exploring it in different stories. It's not explicitly about what I'm going through. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah,
that's, I've always believed that creativity allows us to process things
yeah,
um, in a way that is less painful. I guess not in a way
yeah.
that,
It creates some healthy distance.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, you can still feel the feelings and experience them and still process them and do work on them, but you can do it in a
hmm,
way which is not so raw and so close that
yeah,
that, it, that, it, that it's that it hurts you as much, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think that close processing is really good for like doing that in therapy, doing that with close friends and family, doing that with yourself. And like you need that side of the work. But then when you're in the like integration time of your life, where you're like, okay, I processed some stuff. Now I need to go be a regular person about it. I think that's when creativity is really useful because it can be oftentimes a nonverbal way even to sort through what you're feeling. And yeah, that's what I've been trying to do lately. I've been experimenting with more like self portraiture, just working through feelings. Working only with visuals is really interesting after working with so much in my mind and with my voice the past few
mm,
years. Trying to switch it up. Uh, but like, I feel like creativity is just like, it's such a human thing to do. It doesn't matter how good you are at it or how good you think you should be at it. Like, I think everybody needs that. Everybody needs that.
I agree completely.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I read a book actually once which said that when you journal every day and you journal your emotions, that it does something to your body. It helps
Mm.
you process food better, or your gut and your liver work better, and
Huh.
it does something. It heals your body when you journal your emotions on a regular basis. And
I
um,
believe that. Yeah,
yeah, no,
that's
I
really
believe it
interesting.
too. I absolutely
Yeah.
do. Um, yeah, because it does. It's really amazing, like what the impact that daily journaling can have. And I should do it more. I don't do it enough, but when I do, I know that I'm a lot healthier emotionally and have probably have
Hmm.
more energy as well. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, there definitely is something to that. And everyone can be creative. Like there's no, like you said, there's no kind of rules. Like it doesn't
Hmm.
have you don't have to make your living from being a creative person or to make great stuff for it to be valid. It can be just make the stuff you want to make. That's
Yeah.
what I always say.
Yeah. And like integrating expression into just part of who you are is how I've been thinking about it lately, too. Like, if I'm putting a song on to like dance to when I'm switching between tasks or something, I really try to like feel what's inside me and let that like come out in an expression. And it's not for anybody else except for me. And it's not even a big thing. It's like what, a few minutes. Or this month I've been trying to write a lot more poetry because it's National Poetry Month in the U.S. And I used that as a travel journal earlier this month because I went up to the Seattle area to visit some friends, stay on some islands. It was lovely, and I really liked, being able to write that daily poem. And I wasn't like, today we went and did this, and then we did this. It was like I'm remembering specific images um, of like where I was and how it felt and everything. And I think that I think that is my new way of travel journaling. I like that so much more.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds great. Love that. Um, I've written poetry as well in the past.
Hmm.
When my mum was very ill, and um, she wrote a lot of poetry, and it helped her heal. Poetry
Hmm.
is such an incredible thing because it's like paintings with words. I think because you can read a poem, and everyone will read it differently, and everyone will see it differently, and everyone will interpret it differently, even though it's the same poem.
Hmm.
Because part of your what you get from it is what you bring to it as well. And that's, I mean, to be
Hmm.
honest, that's the same with all art. But I think with kind of poetry and with paintings, there's a more abstract nature to those mediums, and so there's more room for interpretation, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, when you encounter those, that's my experience anyway. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Um, Actually, I'd be willing to share one of the poems I wrote on my trip if you want for an example what
Oh,
I was up to this month.
absolutely. That'd be wonderful. Thank you.
All right. So no, you know what? I'm not going to give context. I'm just going to read it. Brennivin brewed with dark rye, unearthing the tears of gratitude, as if simmered in a pot in the hot geysered earth. Wait for a cycle and then examine it, like the sweetly fermenting rhubarb at my friend's bar. Every time I see him, I see the fruits of the time past, and I've never been wary of if the batch has turned bad, but I'm instead in awe of the beauty that time has done in him. May we all live long enough to see ourselves prove sweet.
Wow.
Um, yeah, so that's what I mean by like it, getting that emotional impression of like where I was at that day and the gratitude I was feeling. It was like,
Mm,
yeah,
I love that. I love that poem. Yeah.
yeah,
Thank you so much for sharing that.
yeah. Of course, I was thinking about like this is a friend that I don't get to see very often, and he is a brilliant bar manager at a island out in the Pacific Northwest, and he had some. He's like basically fermenting some rhubarb to make this like really fantastic addition to some drinks for the summer. Uh, and it was all like delicious. And it's just one of those things where you have to put it all in a jar and you cover it and you go, I hope that turns out good. And it's really, really nice to be able to see him to go like, wow, the batch is still turning out good. And he had, so the Brennivin reference is like, I've been to Iceland a couple times. It's really dear to my heart. And Brennivin is their like traditional spirit. And this one was infused with this dark rye bread that they make, where they put all the stuff into like a cast iron pot and they bury it like a foot or two into the ground around the hot springs. And it cooks it over like 24 hours. And it's so soft and so soft. What was that? Like surfer accent that came out of me.
Yes,
It's
sir.
so soft and delicious. So soft. Anyway, really, really good. And the Brennivin made me cry when I tasted it. So yeah, that's all the stuff I was thinking about that day.
Wow. That's so good. I love it. Yeah. I was moved by it. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um yeah, it's not always easy to share. It's not always easy to share your own work publicly. So thank you.
Oh yeah. I at this point I'm just trying to share whatever I can whenever I can. I think I've been really scared about doing that in the past, and my sense of mortality is only growing with time, so it's becoming easier to share things. I'm just like, you know what? It doesn't matter. I'm just going to share it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah,
Oh wow. Well, this has been really, really good.
yeah,
Again, like we all seem to have really good conversations when you turn up on the podcast. So yeah, and I hope that people listening that it can be kind of inspirational for them because I really believe that creativity can be something that we all can do and all embrace and can be can be joy and also can be healing. So
hmm,
and I think you proved that as well in this conversation that there's it can be really good fun and it
hmm,
also can be really good really healing as well.
yeah. That's what I hope to impart with all of my work. I it's like I want to express myself, but like more than that, I feel like I really want to show people how to connect to their own humanity in as many ways as they can. I really, really hope to inspire people to do that because uh, I think if there's any chance of building healthier, safer, better communities, um, it has to come from like you connecting to your own humanity first and you being willing to like seeing it in yourself and going, oh, I can fight for me. Now I can fight for other people around me and like connect to everyone's humanity. So,
Mm, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. And where can
yeah.
people connect with you and the stuff that you do?
I am on Instagram and also technically Twitter. I've been on there a little less recently, but at Virginia Spots, Spotts. And yeah, I'm hoping to have something to share with some audio fiction ideas that I have simmering in the near future.
And if you haven't checked out the Sheridan tapes, please do go and check them out. They're very good.
Yeah, it's a fun time. It's all out now. You can binge the whole thing if you want to.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely, brilliant. Well, I'm sure we'll have you back again as well. There's loads more we can talk about, I'm sure. So, but thank you for coming on again, Virginia,
Yeah, thank you, James.
and thanks for listening, everybody.